Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie of MadameStitch, and I'm here to talk about the Lotus Blossom Square. The Lotus Blossom Granny Square, designed by Milena of Straight Hooked, is the 10th square in the 2024 Granny Stitch Sampler Blanket. This beautiful square gives the traditional Granny Square the look of a garden flower, starting with a lovely flower center and finishing with the traditional Granny Stitch. So let's talk a little bit about the design of this square. Milena has designed a square that starts as a circle that uses various stitches and contrasting colors to create the look of a lotus blossom. So this is not the first square that you've started as a circle and worked out to a square. So you're very familiar with this technique by this point. That circle becomes a square in round 5 and then continues from there in turned rounds of granny stitch. The color choices in the center circle that make the lotus blossom are repeated later in the square to bring the whole look together. You can choose your own colors for this. I did for my square, but I would highly recommend that you choose 2 contrasting colors that look like a flower for the center circle. After that, you can choose whatever you like. All right, so talking about those color changes, here are some tips for working the square. So I would pay close attention to where the color changes are. I love the way Milena has put together this square and all of the color changes she's chosen. So I think it really completes the look if you follow what she has done in her square. However, you can choose your own colors and do whatever you like after you get past that center circle. Just be sure that you mark it in the pattern so that you know exactly where your color changes are and plan out carefully before you begin. Rounds 1 through 4 are worked without turning, so make a note of that. You'll see in the pattern that there's no reference to do not turn anything. So in rounds 1 through 4, you're working in traditional rounds with the right side facing you. However, beginning with round 5, at the end of round 5, where you start to build out that square, you'll turn after each round. You're still working in the round, but you're turning after each round, and it gives this really cool ridged effect for the granny stitch section of the square. A reminder that the stitch counts in these instructions include the chain 1 spaces as a stitch. So if you're checking the stitch counts after each round, first of all, divide it by 4, and that will give you the number of stitches from corner to corner, so you don't have to count them all the way around. And any chain 1 space that you encounter counts as a stitch. Now, if you have something different in the corners, that doesn't count, but just make sure that the chain 1 spaces are counted as a stitch. Also, we've talked over and over about gauge and about measuring your square as you go along. Again, these squares are all designed by different designers who have different techniques, and you want to make sure that your square comes out in that 12 to 12.5 inch range. So measure your square to be sure you get there. And because this is worked in turned rounds of granny stitch, you can easily add or subtract rounds to get to the right size. Even though the instructions that Milena has given you don't include it, I'm going to encourage you to add a round of single crochet at the end to match the other squares that you've made. Again, I like to do the single crochet round because it gives a really stable edge around your square, especially when you have chain 1 spaces like you do in this one, to seam all of those squares together. So just make sure that you leave about a 1/2 inch to go for your square so that you can add that single crochet round. Not crucial, just a recommendation. And finally, Milena doesn't have a special stitches section in the written pattern, but she has a link to video tutorials in her post and in her pattern and those videos will help you with key spots in the square and with any stitches that you may not know. So make sure that you check out those video tutorials if you get to a spot where you might be having a little bit of trouble. It's not on YouTube, so listed, I think it's a Rumble station, something I'm not familiar with, but she has a link to it so that you know exactly where her video tutorials are. All right, that's all I have to say about that square to help you get to the end. The Lotus Blossom Square adds a wonderful flower garden theme to the Granny Stitch sampler blanket. I love the look of this square. It partners really well with the Blossom Square that you have from made by Goody, and they give that garden feel to the whole blanket. Take your time with this square, especially with the center circle, so that you end up with a beautiful flower that's framed by the granny stitch. It will pay off, I promise. And don't forget to check out Malena's website, Straight Hooked, for more fabulous designs and projects from Malena. Happy crocheting, everybody!